So Brian, with no further ado, you have a book out soon on this whole subject of the future of work, and also very much engaged in recruiting and inspiring a workforce of your own. So over to you to kick us off.
So thank you, Matthew. I just want to start off with a couple of provocations where all of us as marketers, so I run a company, we have, 5,000 people in various parts of the world, and I'm consumed with a couple of topics. First question, will my job and the job of my staff and the job of all marketers and the jobs of my children be done by a machine? I spent, IBM is one of our clients, I spent a day at the Watson Research Lab in the summer. Fascinating day, seeing what incredible capabilities, cognitive capabilities that machines and robots can bring to the world. But it provoked, I drew a picture with one of the guys from the lab afterwards that just talks about how this all fits together. And it's not the man versus machine, it's the humans and machines working in a new relationship. And basically, if you take everything that we do in the world simplistically and say there's a whole bunch of stuff that's repeatable and there's a whole bunch of stuff that's creative, we know that historically, humans have dominated the creative tasks and activities of the world, and that machines have dominated the repeatable. And this is absolutely true. In the upper left, if you're in a venture, an activity that is calculating and executing, the machines will absolutely dominate. And we're seeing risk factors now between 16 and 47% of the world's jobs are supposed to be taken over by machines in the next 10 years. The vast majority are going to be in this little section here, dominated by machines with executing and calculating. And on the other side, here are the things after spending the time with the Watson Lab, it just reinforced my own belief. Here are the things that machines struggle with and humans are best at. They're inventing, they're judging, they're building trust. It's not that machines cannot do these things, but humans still do them best. And what's very interesting for us as marketers and career people and leaders in our companies is some places over in the corners. In the upper left-hand corner, there's an intense opportunity, exceptionally high-value task that humans can do, which is teaching machines rules and creating new test hypotheses. And in the lower right is even our very, very best creative people in my own company, in the arts, throughout the world, are not exclusively taking on creative tasks as a human endeavor, but using machines to inspire and using machines to help them enable and get their work out. So this is a composer who uses composing software. This is in our business. We have 25-year-old people using 3D printers to create three-dimensional sculptures, et cetera, et cetera. The big point here is that each of us needs to find our new place on this curve. And there's incredible value in the upper left, in the world of programmatic media buying. We have 1,000 people in our company who do digital media. They started as spreadsheet slingers. They're almost all gone. What I cannot find enough of is insights people. And so my hunt, I will pay massive premiums in that upper left-hand corner. And I will also pay massive premiums to creative, judging, inventing people who know how to use machines for inspiration and enablement. So one thought and one provocation. So my advice throughout the marketing world is be outstanding at the things that make us human, and especially the role of the chief marketing leader in the company. Invent, judge, create new test hypotheses, teach the machines what to do. And in a world going programmatic and data-driven, this is an immense responsibility for the marketing leaders of the world. There's another model that is emerging, and it relates very specifically to talent and how enterprises and marketing organizations attract and retain talent. This is the old model that many of us grew up with. This is actually what Procter & Gamble looked like and may somewhat look like today. And Ogilvy and Mather, my own company, and Goldman Sachs, and so on. Outstanding premium companies grew up with a very, very highly structured and hierarchical model. The relationship between employer and employee was contractual and exclusive, and it worked exceptionally well for a long period of time. It's got one problem. Millennials freaking hate it. They hate it. They've grown up in a world of unbridled choice, flexibility, different sense of work-life balance. They hate it. And so we need a new model, and I actually enlisted 2 25-year-olds in my own company to work on a model. I've been working on talent stuff over the past year and a half, and it looks quite different. The unit, the basic unit of it, in a world where basically the talent have decided that they want to work with people much more on their own terms. The ascendancy of entrepreneurship, the rise of the gig economy, the willingness to sacrifice certainty for flexibility in their lives. What now becomes obvious is nobody needs to work for us anymore. They need to choose to work for us and choose to work in your company and choose to work for you as a leader. So the unit of measure is bonding between the employing enterprise and the talent. And bonding is the critical factor. It's not contractual bonding, it's emotional bonding that's got a whole different dynamic. Companies are then formed from a whole series of these individual bonds. And the best enterprises will become highly magnetic. They will have cultures and brands, employment brands, that attract people to them. They will have magnetic leaders. They will have much more flexible work terms. How many people here encourage remote working in their workplace? Is that different from 5 years ago? Opening ourselves up to much more different relationships. My own company, my creative director, my global creative director, lives in Maine. He retired 6 years ago, and he won't work for me during fishing season. But we got a deal, which is he's got a day rate, and he knows a lot about us and our company, and he is fantastic. He's a highly differentiated talent, and I'm willing to be incredibly flexible to work with him, and fortunately, he still prefers us. And we have a test today of our bonded relationship, because I've invited him during fishing season to come to a meeting in Missouri. But it's to meet with one of the world's greatest fishing gear companies. So we will see how strong our bond is along the way. One of the things that's happening in this galaxy, this magnetic world with all these far-flung talents, independent spirits, and enterprises, is the war for talent, the traditional war for talent, which was, I'm going to the Ivy campuses, and I'm going to duke it out with McKinsey and Johnson & Johnson and Procter & Gamble. It's much less relevant. It's too narrow. You need a much more inclusive view. You need to go to the entire world of talent, to Bangalore and Belgium and Bend, Oregon, and into different industries that are not your own. You need this global talent quest. The implications are our companies are going to have a smaller full-time core, much more remote workers, much more contractors, much more freelance people. We're going to need to design in our companies the expectation that it's okay to work 4 days a week or 3 days a week or service and labor on demand, and be comfortable with that and not put these independent talent people through 7 weeks of red tape to get their first gig paid for. Onboarding will be more important than ever before. We need to imprint on people. So it's not just a transaction if they work for us 5 days a year. How do you get them to imprint? And finally, the big thing, it's not a talent war, it's a global talent quest. So 3 kinds of people that I'm looking for in this context. I am hunting every day. Part of my global quest is I can't get enough digital bloodhounds. These are people who can read search and social data and sniff out what consumers want. I found 2 great pockets of them. One is in Bend, Oregon, and one is in Brussels, Belgium. And I ended up buying both the companies. I liked them so much. I can't get enough of those. I can't get enough marketing day traders. People who can look like at programmatic media buying and not just crunch the numbers and look at the dashboards. They can make wise little bets every day, continuously. And Rich Pearson from the panel is going to talk more about that, and Mike as well. And finally, I can't get enough content yentas, incredible matchmakers between content and intent, what consumers want in the right channel. I want people who can matchmake all day long. And we're finding many of those in the editorial journalistic world, not in the advertising world, in editorial journalism. So that's it, a couple of provocations on how we as individuals are thinking about humans and machines, and how, as leaders, we need to become more magnetic and more attracting and more inclusive in how we approach talent. Thank you.
So Brian, I'm going to ask you 2 very quick questions before I bring in the rest of the panel. I mean, one is, the curve you showed at the start. I mean, as you look at the traditional marketing company workforce, how much of the workforce of, say, 5 years ago, is doing that kind of repeatable task that can be put out to the machine?
Yeah, a lot. So I think we need to push our staff and our hiring principles more into those corners, get people who are immensely creative and true judges, not just functional. If you just have functional drivers, that is a task that you can mechanize and turn into a more repeatable task, and there are better, smarter ways of doing it. So I think, in some companies, it's half the people.
And how far along are you in terms of making that transition?
So we're, pushing it every day. In our digital media part of our company, we have 1,000 people. 800 of them used to be in the mechanistic bucket. We have 100% changed it over, not 100%, 80% changed it over into the insights business. And we've mechanized and gone to more programmatic ways of doing things. And that will continue on for the next 3 to 5 years.
And you mentioned Watson at the start.
Yes.
I'm intrigued as to whether you think the people at Watson would agree with your view that they're not going to be able to produce better creativity than humans. So I know the traditional pitch has been they can get the average cancer doctor up to the stand. They can beat the average cancer doctor, but they only match the best.
Yeah.
But the view is they can go beyond that.
The truth is the Watsons and these cognitive artificial intelligence capabilities, they're getting smarter, they're getting more emotional. So it's just going to push that curve more and more sort of up and to the right, where the machines will be starting to impinge into creative territories. And my advice for my own kids and my own staff is get over it. It's going to happen. Be better.
But it's not happening yet.
It's starting to. It is starting to. There are artificial intelligence experiences that have strong emotional content. They're getting into areas of judgment. It feels human in terms of how they judge. They cannot make moral judgments, which is the big question for all of us. That's one rule we still want to set, which is what's right for us to do. So it's coming.
And then you mentioned, lastly, leadership criteria and what makes a good leader. And I always think of Sir Martin Sorrell as the old style command and control type leader. I mean, how different is the new model leader going to be?
You know, I do think this notion of magnetism is extremely important. You need to stand for a purpose that attracts people. You need to be very inclusive. You need to be one of those kind of people who brings other talented people along with them. They're not just transactors and they hire people, they bring people with them. And I think the best leaders will definitely have those characteristics. And in fairness to Sir Martin, he's attracted a lot of pretty impressive talents throughout his company. But magnetism is going to become more important in the people you hire and in the leaders that you are yourself.
And I mean, does that mean, you know, you talked about a much smaller workforce. I mean, does it really mean you need to know everyone that you're working with pretty intimately in that situation? So you do need a much smaller team around you? Or?
A thin corona of full-time people, super deeply bonded, and then people you can rely on where they prefer, in a tie, they would prefer to work with you. And you can reach out to them at any moment. And Rich, his enterprise is doing some very interesting things in connecting enterprises to this absolute galaxy of talent.
So Rich, it's interesting. I mean, I think the first time I wrote about what was then Odesk and Elance before you merged and became Upwork, I mean, most of the jobs that were on there were things like, you know, programmer or translation services and things of that kind. I mean, how are you doing in terms of digital bloodhounds and content yenters? Are there many of those people on the site yet? Or?
Absolutely. So we clearly started as a more efficient way to get programming talent, technical talent, and that has changed dramatically in the last 12 months, to which now we have entire content marketing teams being done remotely. And in my own instance, where I think of from command and control in terms of an organization, from a marketing organization, what I believe is pirate ships. Where I've got captains of each ship, and I'm managing this fleet, and we're moving nimbly, and I'm able to develop talent. I'm able to be more nimble, and that has enabled us to have those captains of those ships reach out to the distributed teams and the talent that is global, as Brian mentioned so easily. I guess my provocation would be the smartest people in your company are outside the four walls of your company, and if you're not engaging with them right now, then you're falling behind.
So spell that out a bit more for us.
Well, we have 10,000 freelancers a day joining our service, and they have a range of talents from data entry, doing some of the things that will eventually be done by machines, to chief creative officers or people at the end of their careers living in Maine, living in Kansas City, who are looking to connect with companies for interesting projects and also pay the bills. So that's where we're seeing, not only on that end of the spectrum, but the millennials that Brian mentioned, where they're refusing to work for one company and they're choosing to have a collection of experiences and have the flexibility that allows them to work wherever they want, for whom they want, when they want.
I suppose when I think about when I've used services originally on pre-Upwork days, I mean, a lot of that was about being able to get someone a lot cheaper in the Philippines or whatever to do the translation, or get someone in Eastern Europe to do some programming. And it felt like fundamentally a cost saving, and I wasn't thinking I wouldn't put mission critical work out to people, anything involving IP, certainly to Eastern Europe. And so, I mean, and what you're talking about seems to be, once we're talking about the smartest key people for your project, for your ship, I mean, how have you evolved your platform to be able to
Great question. And there's
identify those people, manage them, make sure the risks are reduced as a client?
Initially, it was about cutting out the middleman and going direct to hire and direct to the talent. We've evolved the service such we develop private talent clouds based on a company's needs. And then, to Brian's point, onboarding and imprinting with that talent to make sure that they're in sync with your company. You're not having to rebrief a team over and over again is really important. So having that bench of talent and having a pool so it's already pre-recruited. It gets through your procurement or teams as well is important.
So what are you seeing in terms of when you see someone that looks like they're a really big talent in your marketplace, then what are they choosing typically in terms of how many companies they want to be magnetically attracted to? How many do they want to stay basically with one or two, or are they trying to build a wide portfolio? Are they wanting very
It's interesting,
variable?
yeah. My wife is also a freelancer, so I've learned a lot watching her, and as well as the data on our service, where you will have the freelancers or millennials who they're not, until they have that trust or that imprint, they're looking to have multiple clients and make sure in case one client goes away, they don't feel dependent on them. So the flexibility is the main driver for why they're choosing that way to work, and that also translates to the number of companies that they're working for, as well as the different types of projects.
But Brian, for a key creative team doing one of your most valuable clients' work,
Yeah.
to what extent would you feel comfortable using a service like Upwork and building your team that way?
We certainly have our talent clouds, if you will. And there's film directors that we've worked with over a 15 and 20-year period. We don't work with them exclusively. They're independent contractors. And it's just, this notion of trust and not having to brief somebody and rebrief them. So the idea of curating down from this entire world, this extra layer, this extension of your company into, people you've worked with before. And then every once in a while, moonshots, you just go, I don't know how to deal with this one. We're going to the world. And so we have a very big social presence, and we use it sometimes to really pitch outside. Most of them are in that second layer, the curated talent cloud, if you will. They know us, we know them, and we're comfortable sharing, sensitive projects.
And many of the companies will start by just doing production work, and then they'll get comfortable with the teams, and then they'll start going further and further into more strategic work.
And then lastly, before I go to Mike, to what extent are you now seeing whole teams forming outside companies and then pitching themselves as teams as opposed to individuals to businesses?
Yeah, we talk a lot about businesses of one that become businesses of many. So as a freelancer who starts getting multiple clients, they start forming agencies, and I believe it's going to go where it's almost like the Hollywood model where agencies are forming on demand. They're completing their projects together and they're dispersing. We have yet to enable that on our platform, but that, I believe, is where we're headed.
So Mike, tell us a bit about Meta Markets first, and then bring us in on how you...
I'll actually say I started as an Upwork vendor, I guess. I got a PhD in Boston and moved to the Bay Area, and I was a data scientist with a degree in looking for work. And I actually ended up, so I think one of the questions is, how does a guy with a PhD in computational biology end up in digital media? It was actually through Upwork that people were looking for folks with data talent. And you said, Matt, could you really trust a freelancer with your data? Well, there's probably a dirty secret that there probably are freelancers with your data out there. The way that I was introduced was someone who was a well-established agency then subcontracted work to me. That was my first exposure to digital media data. So, and I ultimately ended up building a consultancy of other PhDs as I got more and more work. And then I sold that company because everyone always says services don't scale, and started Meta Markets. And really the focus of Meta Markets is, Brian was talking about this world of programmatic marketing. I think it's the most data-intense vertical anywhere. Wall Street sees about 3 billion trades a day. There's about 600 billion trades a day that happen, about more than 100 times more transactions a day in these programmatic media markets. Data is both the fuel and the exhaust of these markets. And so there are a lot of folks that try to bring spreadsheets to the table, spreadsheet slingers, to make sense of this data. But you can't put 20 trillion rows in an Excel spreadsheet. That's the number of rows that we're managing on behalf of our clients. You need tools. You need to automate things. And I think as much as we talk about artificial intelligence, the first wave of value creation for this world of marketing is really around, it's not algorithm, it's automation. And there's I think Einstein had a quote that said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I think likewise, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and not coding up a solution. We need to code solutions up to some of the data drudgery that frankly is happening all over, up and down Madison Avenue. And sort of bring it full circle, humans like to work with tools that challenge them and inspire them. It's not, are we going to get rid of people? I think what we're looking to do are bring people tools that will give them cognitive leverage. And those tools are things like data visualization. Humans, among other things we're good at, we have incredible visual processing capabilities. We can look at 100,000 data points on a screen and immediately identify anomalies. Now, you can get Watson to do that, but it's going to be an expensive project. So for now, I think there's a real opportunity to up-level the kinds of tools that marketers are using as marketing becomes more automated and more data-driven. And MetaMarkets is providing one of those tools to buyers and sellers on the programmatic marketplaces.
And I mean, to what extent? I mean, obviously, you're saying you're not going to be replacing a lot of humans, but I mean, to what extent do you see, as you look across the functions currently being done by marketing, how much fits into this could ultimately be automated completely, and how much is it equipping?
I mean, to sort of make a provocation. I think that it's very early days. When I was a consultant, I worked for telcos, I worked for Major League Baseball, I worked for banks, and I would always meet them and they'd say, oh, we're very automated, we've got an amazing data infrastructure. And then I would get hired and they'd pull back the curtain and you go in and say, oh my gosh, what a disaster. It is very early days, and I think there's a reason Brian's up here. He's at the tip of the spear in terms of thinking about this. But the vast majority of marketing today, in my view, look, Excel is, as much as we want, everyone says, oh, let's get rid of Excel. I think Excel has got another couple of decades here. So I think it's very early days. Watson's a great thing, but those, I think today that's more around the marketing of what IBM can do. But the biggest challenges we face are around cleaning data and structuring it, not around doing deep learning on that data.
So I want to talk a bit about the point Brian made about millennials, and there's a bit of a debate as to whether millennials are really so very different from previous generations. I mean, certainly some people feel, we would have asked for horizontal structures that gave us a lot more power if we'd been able to get away with it. It's not that they're so different in their ambition, but just in terms of what they're able to get. But I mean, what are you seeing in terms of, are they fundamentally different people in terms of what they're expecting from their careers, what they require of a firm to engage them?
I'm actually, I'm a bit of a skeptic of the sort of flat organizations. I tried that in Silicon Valley. There's something called holacracy, which a lot of people have embraced, which is, we'll get rid of all the managers.
Kind of destroyed Zappos, hasn't
Yes,
it?
exactly.
And I think it's a disaster. I think there's a story at Google where Larry Page one day just declared we're going to get rid of all of the engineering managers and product managers, and it was chaos. So I think there's really two pieces. There's accountability, and how do we have accountability in departments? And I think I do believe in a command and control structure. You've got to have someone who ultimately is responsible for the performance of a division or a team or an individual. But then I think there's another place which is really around the kind of work you do and who you collaborate with, and that doesn't need to be bound by these lines of reporting. So I think millennials do want to be inspired. They want to have autonomy, mastery, purpose, right? And I think you've got to give them challenging, interesting problems to work on, which is why giving them interesting tools is valuable. But millennials are not that. I don't think they're that different than all of us. I will say this: there's a lot of millennials that are on Upwork right now. Just as a quick aside, I have a friend who's a startup guy, and he's hired someone from Madison Avenue who nights and weekends does amazing content marketing for his startup. And so a lot of you may have folks who, if they're not inspired at work, they may be turning to places like Upwork, and that cognitive surplus is creating a lot of value for startups in the Bay Area.
We see a ton of the freelancers who come onto our platform looking to build a particular skill or work with a particular company that they're passionate about. And that, I think that differentiates millennials in terms of the values and what they will put first on their list. But I agree largely with what Mike said in that, I try to hire leaders, and increasingly with all these tools, I try to hire orchestrators. And these are folks who can manage multiple objectives and be able to helicopter from 30,000 feet and go down to 100 feet and still have the accountability that I demand. And that also seems to help develop and inspire them.
And Brian, what was the most surprising thing that your millennials that you put to work on the corporate structure came up with? Was there anything that you thought, no, I really don't believe they come up with that?
Some things that are heartening in that they are more sort of traditional values. The feeling, the desire to belong is still very strong, and that's good news for enterprises with a culture. There's a very powerful desire to connect, but it comes with this openness to entrepreneurship, this appetite for flexibility, this growing comfort with uncertainty. This generation has grown up in a much more uncertain world where you don't get hired into one company and last there for a long period of time. Certainly that's more exceptional. So they're more comfortable with that. So there are a few things that are different. I was heartened by the need for belonging and culture and home, even if you travel around a bit and move. So there's still that deep human desire. And then the appetite for experimentation, the appetite for risk is really refreshing on the other side. So I think our models, to Mike's point, it's not throwing away, it's having that core that has some quite structured parts to it, but this layer of flexibility around it to make sure we stay fresh, because staying fresh and agile and nimble is so critical for our
But nothing that alarmed you at all? You thought, I'm not having...
I was more heartened than alarmed.
Slightly alarmed?
I have a high... I'm okay for people to do stuff at night and to come to me and say, you know why I'm here? Because I want to run my own company in 3 years. And I'm okay with that. Because they will work with us again someday in some way, and I'm very comfortable with that as long as they're terrifically talented and buy into our mission. We'll work again someday.
But does that mean you're not going to invest in training them or anything like that?
It's a great question. We are going to invest differently. We're a teaching hospital. A lot of companies are like that, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, and so forth. We used to give tons of training, big investment per staff member, and only to full-time staff. I'm changing that. There's a period where kind of, they're just going to go anyway, so let's disinvest in training. What a stupid idea. However, you don't want to give it away to just anybody, and I'm not going to give my best training away to a person who works with me once. But if you're a person who is bonded to me and has delivered great stuff 5 times in a row, I'll give you like a training dividend. Come to Ogilvy, come to our company, I will give you a 1-day workshop on topic blah, 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 brand building in the digital age, some new technique, some new method. I will give you Ogilvy quality training if you've earned enough credits to get there. And that's just a model that we're working on right now. So you overinvest in your full-time staff, but you give people in the galaxy who've earned it a chance to get more because, as Rich says, people want training and development, and it's hard to get when you're flying solo.
Rich, I mean, do you provide any training at all for your?
We do, and we have we sit on a credible amount of data and are able to provide our freelancers with the skills that are in demand, the average project size and wages for those skills, and then point them towards the training in order to achieve those skills and then eventually the jobs. So that is an incredible part of our long-term strategy, is connecting job demand, wages, and training. And
Is there some kind of reward structure similar to the Ogilvy?
yeah, so as you become a top-rated freelancer on our platform, you get access to training, access to behind the walls of Upwork, as well as one-on-one help and development.
Mike, you wanted to come in?
Well, I was going to say, I saw someone mentioning that you had said, Rich, that the smartest people inside your company are outside the four
So
walls.
this is actually a question from someone sent in from the app, and please keep sending in more questions.
I think it's not...
Is saying the smartest people in your company are outside the four walls of your company a bit insulting to the people inside the company?
I think it's more not necessarily this. If you define smart as the aptitude, but in terms of skill set, the truth is there are a lot of very specialized skills out there that would be impossible to have those skills inside your company, particularly if you're a smaller company. So, people talk about training. In Silicon Valley, sometimes I think people coming in with the tabula rasa, it's better, that they've never been exposed to how to solve it the traditional way or do it the traditional way. So, I think one way to get millennials excited and interested is, what Henry Ford said, when someone tells me something is impossible or it can't be done, I just get someone else to try that same thing. And lo and behold, many times in the history of Ford, the person who said it was impossible, someone else came along and did it. And so I think, finding people outside your organization who look at data in a totally different way, who've come from completely different domains, I think that's where you can get some really fresh, interesting, innovative solutions. And I think a place like Upwork is going to have folks like me, a computational biologist, who could be hired to work on mobile digital media data.
And just to pile on, I think it's not insulting, it's incredibly empowering. We have, as an example, at Upwork, we have 250 employees. We have 800 freelancers that we're working with on a monthly basis. Everyone is a manager in that they are empowered to go out, and if they're not, they don't believe that they're the world-class expert in this skill, they go on the platform, pull somebody in, and they will work with them. And that's the type of orchestration and type of talent that I'm looking to hire.
But Brian, when you think about 10 years' time, I mean, how much of the workforce do you think is going to be working on platforms like Upwork, and how much is going to be in more of a kind of magnetic relationship with companies like yours?
So I would say there's the full-time part, and then there's the magnetic part, and I would include Upworks in that, which is, I think that is based on relationship thinking, not just transactional thinking. It's moving pretty fast. Again, in the past 24 months, we've changed our company policies on remote working. You get pre-approved to work remotely, and you don't have to ask permission. You just say, I'm going to be working from this location at this time. And that's relatively different for a big corporate, client-facing situation. We have, this appetite for outside talent. The percentage of our staff that is full-time to gig, it's changing pretty fast. So we will still definitely in our company be well more than 50% core. But that second layer, it's definitely going to grow. And I'm not sure how far it's going to go eventually. I think it would be tough for a company like ours to be more than 50% dependent on that extra layer, because we have a lot of strong cultural beliefs. But it's growing pretty fast.
I mean, it's interesting, only a couple of years ago that Marissa Mayer, when she took over at Yahoo, insisted that everyone who was remote working came into the office and worked there. I mean, was that just a catastrophically bad decision, or was there something that we can learn from that?
Just my own view, we still believe in face-to-face. We use Skype, we use video conference call. But when we get together, it's a party because you can't party on Skype, last time I checked. So we argue, we debate. I just finished 2 days here in New York. So when we do live, it's really live with a view to bonding. And we drink and we eat and we play music and we do stuff. So what we don't do is get together face to face and watch each other put keynote slides and write on the whiteboard. So we're kind of separating those two things out better. Might have been a good decision for Yahoo. I don't know. It depends what they do once they're in the live one-to-one. I think that's the more important one.
And the last time we met, you were playing a harpsichord, not a harpsichord, harmonica, and doing a presentation as you did that. So I guess one of the leadership skills.
It was highly anti-magnetic performance. Driving people into the exit.
Rich, and then we'll go to some questions.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important to have those bonding moments, and I don't envision a future where you have some remote first companies, but each of them have a ritual where they get together and they party and they bond. We bring all of our freelancers in on a quarterly basis so we can have that face-to-face to make sure that imprint is still strong. There's clearly a ring of freelancers that are more transactional, but I worked at Yahoo, and I can tell you that the culture was pretty terrible, and I think that was a smart move.
We have a couple of questions from the audience, and do please also use the app. There's a gentleman in the middle. If you'd say who you are. While the mic goes there, just there's a question up there. What's sort of wage difference ratio on the cloud services?
It really varies by category and country, and it can be 80%. Like example, for me to hire a UX designer in San Francisco right now, it'll be $250 an hour. I'll have to wait 6 months probably to speak with someone. I can hire somebody for $125 in Jacksonville and probably a team of them in Jacksonville, and they'll be ready right away. So it depends by category and by geography.
Please say who you are as well, thanks.
Where are you going in trying to make it more accommodating and learning for people coming in to your different firms? Do you do anything like this, real teaching and real experience in bringing people?
Right.
So heavy rotational program, ongoing. We've started to reinvest in it. We disinvested over probably a decade. So we're reinvesting heavily. The other thing we're doing a lot more of is two-way mentorship. I do a project with a 20-something-year-old every week, every single week of the year, so that I'm passing on some things that I've accumulated and learning tremendously, just like this project on the talent model would be an example. So it's a combo of some classroom and a lot of experiential live stuff.
Another question?
I would mention that the apprenticeship model is, I think, a great model. So, some things are just hard to formalize in a training session, so it could be a powerful.
A conversation I have with a lot of companies now is, how do we market ourselves as places to work? How do we market ourselves to the new generation of workers? And there's a lot of thinking about employer branding, essentially. I mean, what any advice for the audience here in terms of?
I feel incredibly lucky. I live in San Francisco where you see buses, you see massage therapists, you see yoga instructors, but the most important thing that's keeping our talent is our purpose. And so if you find your company's purpose, find your department's purpose, I think as was said in an earlier panel, and make sure everyone believes in that, and that will trump any type of free sandwiches or free massages any day.
And is that something that people are going on to Upwork and marketing, or are they marketing just the actual task, or are they marketing more the organization you'll be working with?
We have a community that believes in this lifestyle and believes that this is the way forward, and they are evangelizing on our behalf. This is how they work, or this is how they found workers. So that is an incredible tailwind that we have.
What about you, Mike?
I'd say for the hardest hires in Silicon Valley are people with technical skills, and so if you want to get a great engineer to come work at your company, my number one piece of advice is embrace open source software. So we've been doing everything in our stack is open source, and we've invented some open source technologies that are now used at other companies, and that's for a lot of people, their purpose is they're kind of techno-utopians, and they want to build software that can be used both by your company, but potentially gain them some street cred and fame beyond the four walls of your business.
Brian?
And we have a very heavy social presence. It's designed to get our purpose out. It's designed to get our work out. It's designed to show the kind of people who work at and succeed in our company. And that's been a dramatic increase. So that's how millennial talent shops for an employer. And so we make sure that we're there when they're shopping and seeing us in some appropriate light. And it's worked tremendously. We have never had as much inbound talent flow. For our internship program, we have 15 places. We get 2,000 applications.
Just to wrap up, if you were advising a 15-year-old who was saying, well, I've seen Mad Men, I fancy a career in the advertising or marketing business. Yeah. How should I be preparing to enter that world? And should I go down that career route? What would your one piece of advice be?
So I think it's still fantastic because it's business meets creativity, and what a great intersection. And I would urge them to develop both their soft and hard skills in equal measure to gain long-term transportable skills, meaningful experiences, quite diverse and interesting experiences, and to start nurturing some enduring relationships, mentoring relationships and so forth, because it's going to have to last 50 years.
I would say seek out opportunities to develop and build your EQ and learn to code.
No.
Mike?
Yeah, I would say learn to write poetry and learn to code.
Poetry and code, that's the new key to success. Great. Well, thank you very much, panel, for a very stimulating conversation.